Order. And I'd like to welcome our witnesses today, Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, Director of Central Intelligence Agency, John Brennan, Director of Defense Intelligence Agency, General Vincent Stewart, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Jim Comey, and Director of the National Security Agency, Admiral Rogers. To each of you, welcome. I'd note that Director Clapper and General Stewart have already appeared before the Senate Armed Services Committee this morning, and I appreciate you both suffering through a very long day of testimony. I also thank our other witnesses for their attendance and participation. Today's hearing presents an opportunity for both the witnesses and members of the committee. It's my sincere hope that our discussion will shed some light on the dedicated and tireless work of our intelligence community professionals, the men and women represented by our witnesses. Their efforts to keep America safe often go unrecognized, but that does not mean it goes unnoticed. I've spent the better part of 20 years as a member of the Congressional Intelligence Committees and have seen the scale, scope, and type of threats to our nation evolve greatly. We no longer live in a world defined by a few distinct and well-defined threats. Our intelligence professionals are faced with collecting against and analyzing the threat posed by a range of actors from nation-states on down to homegrown violent extremists. Director Clapper, in your statement, you've pulled together the collective expertise of the intelligence community's extraordinary men and women. We value your laying out for our benefit the diverse and evolving and decentralized system of threats that imperil this nation and its interest across the globe. And I ask that everyone take a moment to reflect on the range of expertise required to make sense of this information. I note in your statement that cyber, and more broadly, technology, headline your global threats. I agree with the assessment that innovation and increased reliance on information technology in the next few years will have significant consequences on society's way of life and, more specifically, how your officers perform their mission. I look forward to your highlighting some of the challenges and consequences as you see them. I also remain concerned by the technological reach of ISIL and the danger of their using the information technology, social media, and online research capabilities we use every day to propagate their barbaric message. Jim, I do hope you'll dedicate some time to laying out that particular threat, and I thank you again for being here today. I'd like to also highlight for my colleagues that the committee will be holding a classified hearing on worldwide threats later this week. To the degree it needs saying, please reserve any questions that you think might not be appropriate for an open session until the Thursday hearing. With that, again, I welcome our witnesses here today, and I turn to the Vice Chairman for any comments she might have.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. And I join you in welcoming our witnesses and also thanking the intelligence community for its service to this country. I also share your sentiment that this annual open hearing is important to help explain to the American people the threats that face this nation and the efforts of the dedicated men and women of the intelligence community to keep us safe. I want to open my comments by recognizing the significant contributions made by you, Director Clapper, as the leader of this community. You're the longest-serving Director of National Intelligence to date, and I think both the Chairman and I remember when the DNI was developed and put into effect. Your capable stewardship of the community has driven it to be a more integrated and capable organization than at any time in history. So I want to personally thank you for the contributions you have made to this country's security. But as you know, there is no rest for the weary. The threats that face this nation and our allies seem only to grow. The Syrian war is approaching its 5th year, yet Bashar al-Assad is still in power, and a refugee crisis is destroying the lives of millions of innocent families and wreaking havoc across Europe. We are witnessing the resurgence of an unpredictable Russia in Eastern Europe and Syria. North Korea last month conducted its fourth nuclear bomb test, and 2 days ago conducted what it called a space launch. Of course, this is actually a thinly veiled test to develop missiles that could deliver weapons of mass destruction against a number of countries, including the United States. While these threats are significant and troubling, we are all deeply concerned about the threat from ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, and other terrorist groups. To us, ISIL is much more than a regional threat within the Syrian and Iraqi borders. It's a terrorist army, a global exporter of terrorism, with a presence in a number of countries. The official count is 11, including ISIL affiliates, but some of our friends, like the King of Jordan, have said there are in as many as 17 countries. And ISIL has the ability to spread its message of hate and violence around the world using social media in a very sophisticated way. Director Clapper, I've read your written comments and am very much interested in your assessment of these global threats, their status today, and the outlook for the future. I'd also ask you to comment on how the intelligence community is positioned to address these threats. Is it better today than it was, let's say, 5 years ago? For instance, while the coalition's air campaign is helping to deny ISIL some territorial safe havens and financial resources, how do we degrade it and destroy it if all they need to carry out an attack in the West is an internet connection and an encrypted message application? I'd like to hear your assessments of how the rise of end-to-end encryption has impacted our nation's ability to identify and track individuals who seek to do us harm. Director Comey has spoken of this concern often. Director Rogers recently highlighted it as well. I'm interested in your views today about its impact and how you recommend we tackle this problem of terrorists and criminals communicating via these encrypted message applications. The U.S. Freedom Act that passed last year eliminated the bulk collection of telephone communications metadata, and the new law now requires specific queries with FISA court approval to individual telecommunication companies. Has this change affected your ability to discover new threats and relationships? So I'll save the rest of my comments for questions, but gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. We look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Before I recognize Director Clapper, let me say to members, it's my intent, hopefully it's been conveyed to all members, who will be recognized for 5 minutes in the order that you appeared, and with one exception. If there is no objection, when Director Clapper's testimony is over, I would like to recognize Senator Langford for first set of questions, for the simple reason that on Tuesdays he has to preside over the Senate, and he has to preside at 3:20 today, and I'd like to let him get a set of questions in. So, James, you will be recognized. With that, the floor is yours, Director Clapper.
Chairman Burr and Vice Chairman Feinstein, members of the committee. First, Chairman Burr, thanks very much for the acknowledgement, particularly of the great men and women of the U.S. intelligence community whom we represent here today. And it's very appropriate that you do that for the great work that they do. And Madam Vice Chairman, thank you very much for acknowledging my long service. It's very gracious of you. We're here today to update you on some, but certainly not all, of the pressing intelligence and national security issues facing our nation, many of which you both alluded to. And so there'll be a certain amount of echo here, I guess. In the interest of time and to get to your questions, we'll cover just some of the wave tops, and mine will be the only opening statements so we can go to your questions. And I apologize in advance to the crossover members who were present this morning at the Senate Armed Services Committee. But in the highest traditions of that's our story, we're sticking to it. It'll be the same statement. As I said last year, unpredictable instability has become the new normal, and this trend will continue for the foreseeable future. Violent extremists are operationally active in about 40 countries. 7 countries are experiencing a collapse of central government authority, and 14 others face regime threatening or violent instability or both. Another 59 countries face a significant risk of instability through 2016. The record level of migrants, more than 1 million, arriving in Europe is likely to grow further this year. Migration and displacement will strain countries in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. There are some 60 million people worldwide considered displaced. Extreme weather, climate change, environmental degradation, rising demand for food and water, poor policy decisions, and inadequate infrastructure will magnify this instability. Infectious diseases and vulnerabilities in the global supply chain for medical countermeasures will continue to pose threats. For example, the Zika virus, first detected in the Western Hemisphere in 2014, has reached the U.S. and is projected to cause up to 4 million cases in this hemisphere. With that preface, I want to briefly comment on both technology and cyber specifically. Technological innovation during the next few years will have an even more significant impact on our way of life. This innovation is central to our economic prosperity, but it will bring new security vulnerabilities. The Internet of Things will connect tens of billions of new physical devices that could be exploited. Artificial intelligence will enable computers to make autonomous decisions about data and physical systems and potentially disrupt labor markets. Russia and China continue to have the most sophisticated cyber programs.